What's the scariest encounter you've had with a total stranger? I was about 19 and driving home from dinner one night, probably a ribeye sandwich from the local truck stop, because those were cheap and excellent. A woman standing next to a motorcycle at the side of the road waved me down, so I stopped. She said that she'd run out of gas, and that she didn't want to scare me, but her boyfriend was hiding down over the bank. Uh-oh. This giant comes up over the bank in dusty road leathers. He's a damn mountain of denim, leather, and hair. Crap. Fake damsel in distress, I'm an idiot. I was so close to home I felt safe, maybe? Maybe I can leg it home. Surely, he's too big to be fast. The giant apologizes for hiding, but we ran out of gas, and there was no way anyone was going to stop on an empty road to help with me standing here. He's embarrassed. Now I felt a little guilty for agreeing with him. He's intimidating as hell without putting any effort into it. He doesn't have to. We're out of sight and isolated on a secondary road, but it's less than a mile to I-80. I can almost see my house from where I'm standing. It gets boring from there. I tell him I've got a can of gas for the lawnmower with at least a gallon left in it. He says he can go 70 miles on that. The truck stop is 2-3 miles up the interstate, and is happy to pay for it. I'm home and back in 2 minutes. He insists on paying me $10 for a $2 gallon of gas because I'm not sure I'd have come back if I were you. There was just that 15 seconds of ice-cold, slow-motion terror between the girlfriend saying she didn't want to scare me, who says that? And the mountain coming up over that bank and apologizing. I pulled over to help a lady with a flat tire one night in West Texas. While talking to her and showing her how to change the tire, I heard a sneeze come from the dark bushes off the shoulder. Out of habit, I said, "Bless you," and heard a thanks come back from the magical talking bush. I shot her a confused look, and she face-palmed and sheepishly explained that the man in the bush was her husband, and he didn't want to scare me off to help with the tire. I asked why he didn't change it, and she let it slip that he was wanted by U.S. Marshals. I finished up, and she offered me $100 to keep quiet. I figured $100 for me to forget was a good deal, so I accepted and left. 15 minutes down the road, 6 Texas troopers went flying by the other way. Hope they don't think I snitched. It's a mix of the scariest and the best. I was 11, and at the park with my cousin who was 3. My cousin, being a stubborn 3-year-old, told me to leave him be, and I sat out on the bench. I was just reading my book, and occasionally looking up, until this 50-something-year-old man sat down next to me, and just started talking. He asked me, which kid was mine 4 times, even after I made it quite clear I was uncomfortable, and then he gets all close to me, and was like, "Do you want another one?" So I started freaking out, until this homeless man, who I later knew to be Marty, pulled me off the bench, and told him that he was lucky he didn't pop his jaw and told me to go home. I'm glad Marty showed up, because I don't know what I would have done. Marty is a legend. He was great. Which kid is yours? Sir, I am also a child. Most likely, he already knew this and was a pedo. I was once driving in the country and it was pouring rain in the dead of night. So hard that I was driving very slowly and couldn't see any of the signs, before GPS. I mean, I had never been in rain this heavy. I had to pull over to the side of the road to try and see the sign to see if I was going in the right direction. I didn't get out due to the rain, so was craning my neck forward to try and make out where I was when suddenly the passenger door opened and a man got inside the car, sat down and looked at me. Here is South Africa. There is a fair amount of violent crime and hijackings, so I instinctively started panicking and yelling and screaming at the top of my lungs, flailing my arms to try and do something, anything to stop this guy from attacking me. He started screaming as well in terror and jumped out the car. I quickly leant over and closed the passenger door and sped off down the road. I was breathing so heavily at this point and trying my best to calm down, nearly in tears. I kept replaying it in my head the whole time, and suddenly remembered that the man smiled at me. It suddenly dawned on me that it was probably a hitchhiker that I hadn't seen, who thought that I was pulling over to give him a lift. Only to be greeted by me screaming and trying to hit him. Was probably his scariest encounter with a stranger as well? Kept replaying it in my head the whole time, and suddenly remembered that the man smiled at me. It suddenly dawned on me that it was probably a hitchhiker that I hadn't seen, who thought that I was pulling over to give him a lift. only to be greeted by me screaming and trying to hit him. Was probably his scariest encounter with a stranger as well? Or maybe he made a mistake and got into the wrong car since it was raining so heavily? Speaking from personal experience here, facepalm. I dropped my son off at school one morning and then went to the grocery store with my infant daughter. It was so early, there was only one or two other customers. There was an older man with a walker that I didn't really pay too much attention to that kept popping up in the same aisle as us. I got out to my car and put my groceries in and then was putting my daughter in her car seat when the man came up behind me. He asked me a question and when I turned to answer, he shoved his walker into the back of my legs, pinning me against my car inside the open door. I tried moving around but couldn't go anywhere except forward, and he started pushing me down to the floor of my car. I was so scared that once he had me down there he was going to go for my daughter, so I threw myself over her so my whole upper body was in her car seat and wedged myself in tight, trying to cover as much of her as possible. He grabbed me by the hair and was trying to pull me up when someone started honking his or her car horn. Another mom had been sitting in her car with her own baby asleep and had seen what was happening. Another car pulled up behind mine and the man ran over and got in quickly, obviously never needing the walker. The police were called but the plates on the car that he left in were stolen, so as far as I know he was never found. My story is not quite the same as most. Years ago, I used to work as an ecological surveyor. Basically, I got paid to take long walks in the Peak District National Park here in the UK and note down all the plant species I saw. I was walking down a trail one morning along the edge of a woodland when suddenly about 8 of the bushes stood up and produced rifles. I nearly crapped myself and they were laughing like hell. It was a bunch of British Army guys on a camouflage and concealment exercise, and they had been following me to practice. Apparently, I had nearly trodden on one of them earlier as he was hiding right by the trail. We all ended up sitting around talking about football for a bit. Nice bunch of guys, but very scary indeed. I, 21, female at the time, was in a store picking up some items for my house when I noticed a man was literally peeking at me from around a corner. I first brushed it off and continued my shopping, but was aware that this man was following me around the store. He then sang out to me and said I looked familiar and asked if I went to the local university. I didn't, so I said no. At this point, I got creeped out, so I checked out and went to my car. I heard footsteps behind me and knew he had followed me, so I just jumped in my car and locked the doors. It was dark, so I hadn't noticed him go around the back of my car until he banged on my passenger window. I ignored him and started the car. This prompted him to run around the front and start banging on my driver's side door, trying to open it and asking me for a ride. I was terrified and just pulled out of the parking space as fast as I could and drove off, with him chasing my car until I rounded a corner. I have no idea what his plan was, but to this day, I am nervous about dark parking lots at night. I say this not just to you, but to everyone. If you think someone is following you, for goodness sake, please don't leave a more populated area for a less populated one. If you're in a store, find a manager or security person, let them know you fear you're being followed, describe the person, and then ask for someone to walk you to your car. Most businesses will be happy to oblige. There were 2 times in the last 2 years where I was followed in a store, and as soon as I got home, both times I regretted not telling a security person or worker. Fear overtook me and I was scared that I was wrong about being followed and that I might get an innocent person in trouble. But, looking back, I was absolutely being followed, and I fear that when I removed myself from those situations that the creeps targeted other women. Please, please, please tell someone if you think you're being followed. You never know someone's intentions, and if there's even a slight chance that you are in danger, take it seriously. You could save not only your own life, but potentially someone else's, too. A helpful tip: if you ever find yourself in this situation again, hopefully not, ask one of the workers, or the security guards in the store to escort you to your car or help you load your groceries. It makes me feel a million times safer if I'm by myself or it's dark. I was taking a shower in the bathroom of the walkout basement. My 3-year-old son was upstairs with my mother eating breakfast. I heard him open the door and told him, "Mommy is in the shower, you have to wait." The door didn't close, but he didn't respond either, so I asked him to go back upstairs and ask Grandma for whatever he needed. Instead, I see a shadow, outline of a hand touching the shower curtain, and realize that there is an adult in the bathroom, not my son. I scream and punch through the shower curtain. I don't think I connected, but I heard the man run out anyway. As fast as I could, I jumped out and grabbed a towel to check on my son and mom. At the same time, my mom was coming downstairs to see if I was okay from the scream. The man never went upstairs and they didn't even know it had happened. The walkout basement door and window were open. I called the police and they didn't find him, just my empty wallet about a block away. They did come back to me a few weeks later to let me know that they caught a guy in the area raping women at gunpoint and they think it was the same guy. Never been so scared in my life. Add, the most visceral part for me was knowing he was just standing quietly in the bathroom while I talked to him like he was my son. Honestly, I don't know why, but that creeps me out the most. It felt really violating at the time. Jesus, how are some people so terrible? This whole post is too full, just how? When I was around 10 to 11, a friend invited me to a water park. During swimming at a wave pool, he found some random kid around our age and decided to tell this kid that the game we were going to play was hold me down in the water. I didn't get that memo, so I thought him and this kid were just trying to drown me. This went on for what felt like an hour of me swimming away and hiding. I didn't hang out with him afterward. Same trip. After we were done with the pool, I got to the changing rooms and there was a couple people in there. Old man on the bench asked me if I wanted him to help me change. I just said no thanks and quickly changed and ran out. This was scary for me to read, because around your age I was at a water park with a wave pool. A good friend of mine invited me. We were swimming around and got separated, and this buff guy swam up to me, put his hands on my shoulders, and pushed me down under the water. He wasn't letting go. I was in disbelief, tried to push my way back up. He was probably 3x as strong as me. Because I was surprised and struggling, I was running out of breath quickly. I felt myself giving up. At this point, the guy stopped pushing me down and let me surface. I looked into his face and he laughed like a crazy person. A wave came and he swam into a crowd of people. I got the F out of there and haven't gone in a wave pool since. Never told my friend, but I told my parents and a therapist years later. I'm now 27 and it's no surprise that my number one fear is being murdered by a stranger. I am still unsure how the whole hold people underwater is fun. I stopped hanging out with that kid after that. I don't need to know if he was going to try and go farther with something else. Friend pushed me into the deep end of the pool, not knowing I don't know how to swim. I don't understand what I did, how I did it, but I was able to frantically swim out of the water and borderline torpedo out of the water, before vomiting a lungful of water. Butthole never spoke to me again. My dad told me he lost a friend in school this way. People in his class threw the guy in the pool for a laugh, assuming he could swim. He vowed that we, his children, would have to learn to swim from a super young age, regardless if we hated it or not. Pedo down the street tried to lure my sister and me to his house while we were walking down the street. We started ignoring him. On the way back, he threatened us and we went to my landlord's house to call the police. Guy got arrested shortly after but was bailed out. His dad was a sex offender and there had already been multiple complaints about him from other parents. Glad my sister and I were smart enough not to engage with him and to get help right away. Not scary per se, but deeply disturbing. Random dude at my local library accosted me while I was enjoying a new sci-fi novel and was absolutely convinced I was his son. Kept telling me he was sorry and he never meant to kill my mother, who he called pink, and said some other heinous crap I won't describe. That crap crazy, but he sounded so rational and calm the whole time. Crap gave me the creeps for a long time after. Hey, I also call people colors when I'm on a psychotic mania trip. Swore to God that might have been me if instead of a library it was a bar in Bangkok. I also call people colors when I'm on a psychotic mania trip. Wow. Man. I had a hell of a week. Helping this missing woman's parents get to their daughter, whom they told me was diagnosed with schizophrenia and bipolar disorder, one or two they don't know. She's homeless and has been for the last 6 years. Pretty heavily affected by her illness and drug use. She's been in my neighborhood across the country from where she's actually from, for about a year now. The entire story is a lot. But the people as colors thing caught me here. She kept talking about how me and my partner are pink but most people are orange. She kept going on between metaphors about Cartoon Network, Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends, to explain her childhood. She believes she's a foster kid. She's not. She looks exactly like her mother that was standing 10 feet from her, very paranoid, and calling people formats and apprentices. Format in her case had a negative connotation. Apprentice equals positive. But for a year, she's consistently talked about people as colors. I didn't know that wasn't individual to just her. The more I read about people's experiences with these disorders, the more common threads I find in their delusions. Each person experiences it differently, I assume, but it's really interesting to see that again after this week. 14 years old, walking home, it was dark. Man gets off the bus, opens up his coat, and says, "Like what you see?" He was in his 40s. Completely naked. I've never run so fast in my life. But like surely the dumbest question ever, obviously not. Flashers get off on their victim's disgusted look, though. Was flashed similarly when I was younger and always wondered how I should have reacted differently to not give him what he wanted. I wish I could have just stood there and laughed at him. They're all looking for some kind of reaction: disgust, mockery, awe, and anger, whatever. So ignoring completely and then calling the police is the best option. I will never forget it. When Ghostbusters 2 came out, I wanted to see it. My mom took me to the local theater. I think I was around 9. I needed to use the bathroom, so I ran down the small hall and turned the corner. When I saw a much older man come out of the bathroom. When he saw me, he stopped, went back in. When I didn't move, he opened the door, peeking his head and arm out, motioning me to come towards him. I probably looked like a deer in headlights. I didn't move. It was frozen until he said, come on in." Panic rushed over me and I ran back towards my mom, who said I was pale white. She quickly left the theater with me and went home. Stranger danger worked out that day in the 80s. I can still picture him, or at least the picture my brain made of this memory. Edit. Sorry I can't get to everyone's questions, but I truly thank you for sharing your stories. I had no idea how common this was for little kids. I am so glad most, if not all of you, ran back to safety. It saddens me for the kids that didn't have that instinct. No kid deserves to be scared or coerced by another adult, regardless of intentions. In the 80s, kids were left alone more. We were left at amusement park as teens, kids at mall arcades. It is just how it was. Without the internet, you never knew what was outside the general area of coverage unless it was extreme and made it to national news. Today we know what could be lurking behind open doors, vans, and corners, but that doesn't make it any better. It's still scary, and I am glad more kids are watched more closely, not left alone, etc. Be safe, and please, after reading all these comments, teach your kids stranger danger and drill it in their heads. Edit 2. Thank you for all of the awards and all the stories. Although, hearing all these stories reminds me that it can be very scary out there. Keep safe and healthy, everyone. Thank you, everyone. A similar thing happened to me when I was 10 at a drugstore. I was reading a comic when a man who looked like Santa started talking to me. He had duct tape and paper towels in his cart. I remember because I spent a lot of time in there and never knew they had carts. He asked if I could come to his apartment across the street and help him move some boxes. I told him I'd have to ask my mom. Then he leaned in and quietly added that he had some penthouses I could have in exchange. I immediately stood up, walked over to the counter and told the lady what he said. He hustled out while she was dialing security. I don't think they caught him, but they had him on security cam. Edit. I also remember exactly what he looked like. His white shoes, flooded pants, light striped button-down short-sleeved shirt with suspenders, his too tight watch and oddly thin wedding band. I hope I see him again one day. Hell no. This is definitely the creepiest one I have read so far. Jesus, that gave me chills. So glad you made the decision to run back to your mom. When I was 15 or 16, I was working at a movie theater and ripping tickets at the gate to a hallway with 4 different theater screens in it. 2 of them are for the newly released Britney Spears movie. It's just kids, girls specifically, flooding in. Some with parents, some not. All young. One guy comes up, and he hands me the ticket. It's that Britney Spears movie. He's got no kids. There's a chance he might have had them go on ahead, or they could be getting a snack at the concession stand, so I ripped the ticket and let him in. I don't know how long it was before I turned around to check, and the guy is standing by the door, holding it open with his foot trying to appear helpful, but I know our doors are locked open when the auditorium is filling, so he's not doing anything. Well, not a thing other than staring at all the children. I wave over a coworker, ask him to take my spot so I can use the men's room, and I haul ass up to the first floor and grab a manager and a security guard and come racing back down. Dude's still there. Sees me, I point at him, and he books it into the theater to hide. Security drags him out and he's shouting about how he didn't do anything. Police, etc. No idea what happened from there for him. But I got the policy changed and we now had to rip tickets inside the hallway with the different theaters instead of outside, so we could keep watch on people like that. Edit, folks, I get you are appreciative. But it's cool, alright? No need, nor desire to receive thanks or praise. It's just a thing. Edit 2. A few comments suggesting he did nothing wrong. What if he just wanted to watch the movie? Blah blah. If he wanted to see the movie and nothing else, he wouldn't have been standing pretending to hold the door open. He wouldn't have been staring at children and preteens as they passed by. He wouldn't have tried to run away from security. If anyone wishes to continue to defend pedophilia, then bring it on. The more of you monsters step into the light of day, the better the world gets. F you. Creepy as F, laughing my butt off. I always low-key worry I'll look like this guy when I go watch a Marvel movie in my hometown and the only people there are parents with their kids. Of course, I generally don't tend to stare quietly at children while licking my lips like there's a Thanksgiving turkey on the table. So there's that. I was walking home from the bus stop after school. About 15 years old. It was really not far, but there were construction workers drinking on the side of the road. One of them got up and followed me home calling suggestive things. I honestly can't remember what, but his intentions were clear. This was about 200 meters from home, so I sprint home. We have an automatic gate, so I realize he will catch me if I wait for it to open, or he'll follow me in. So I climb over, which is normally not easy, but that day I flew over. I was really shaken up. For me, this story is actually about what happened next. Which is that I called my mom, who had an intense job. She dropped everything at work, came home immediately, and made me hot chocolate and pancakes. We had a long conversation where she validated my feelings and fear. She's the best. Walking to my friend's house the last day of 8th grade. An old lady pulled her car next to me, almost cutting off my walking path. I backed away because WTF? She called out to me that she liked my hair. Then she said that her hair used to be my color until she got raped. You'd better believe my little chunky butt ran to my friend's house and told her parents. What is it with people and hair? Like the number of people that just come up to you and start touching your hair, just no, please. I'm late to the party here, but I was once threatened by a man with a scoped rifle while walking my dog. I was out in a field behind my apartment building at night, and I heard a voice from behind me say, "You better run fast, boy." I turned and saw a backlight silhouette of a man on a balcony with a scoped rifle, and I heard him close the bolt. I decided that running would only add tension to the situation, so I yanked on my dog's leash while calmly yet quickly walking towards the closest cover I could find. I immediately called 911, and when it was all said and done, the guy with the rifle claimed he was just showing the rifle to his friend. BS, but I couldn't prove otherwise. That's effing terrifying. F that guy. Went to a yard sale with my aunt when I was like 5. A little boy, about the same age as me, approaches me and tells me to come inside to meet his dad. I wander off with him without my aunt noticing, and he brings me into the house where the yard sale is taking place. We go down to the basement and there was his naked dad, lying on a couch excitedly greeting me as if he'd been awaiting my company or something. I actually don't remember much after that. I just got out of there as fast as possible, and it's been a strange memory of mine ever since. I hope that little boy is doing okay. I know. I'm glad the original poster got out of there, but who knows what problems, mental or otherwise, the son is living with now in his adult life. Well, that's scary as crap. I'm glad you were able to get away, but geez Louise, that poor boy, frowning face. I don't know what's more disturbing, the thought that he sent the little boy to get you, or the thought that he was waiting for the little boy and then got excited when he happened to also bring you. How about the fact that he was bold enough to try to do something like this while there was a busy yard sale going on right outside his home? Even if you have no reason to expect anyone to enter your home without your permission, that's still incredibly bold. I was in high school and worked at a truck stop. One night a trucker came in and stared at me for a long time. Wherever I moved to, he was staring me down. I told him that if he needed anything that he would need to come to the counter and order it. He just grunted and kept staring. I'm not a small person, and at that time, I was in football, wrestling, and track. I was also at the gym 6 days a week. I was 190 pounds of muscle and teenager hormones. But the vibes I was getting from this guy were making me nervous. I called up my other co-worker and told them I was going to be in the freezer for a while. So I was stocking the freezers and coolers for a while and then went to the bathroom. As I entered the bathroom, the trucker jumped up, walked in behind me, and just stood in there while I took a piss and washed my hands. As soon as I got out, I grabbed the trash bags and beelined outside to take care of the trash at the pumps until he left. My coworker asked me why the trucker kept following me after I finally came in. I had no idea why. He never said anything. Didn't order anything. Just filled up his semi and creeped on me. I've never been as creeped out by a person as I was with that guy. Edit, thanks for the awards, kind strangers. I had just left my apartment to go for a walk down towards the beach at night when it was pitch black. There was a park along the way. Some guy came up to me asking to use my phone. I apologized, lied, and said I didn't have one. He didn't believe me and started to get aggressive. He asked me where I lived and if I had a boyfriend. He started following me, and that's when I started to run and went back to my place. I didn't feel comfortable going where I wanted. It's always creepy when someone asks me for my phone. When I was about 6, I was with my family at an incredibly crowded street festival we go to every year. I remember we had stopped to watch a band play for a minute or two, and then my mom, I assumed, took my hand and we continued walking. After a few seconds, I realized the hand I was holding was puffy and hot, and my mom's hands were always cool and more slender, so I knew it wasn't her hand I was holding. I looked up to see a woman with long blonde hair and sunglasses grinning down at me. I said, "You're not my mom," and she just laughed and said, "That's okay, you can come with me anyway." Obviously, my mom and dad had realized I was not with them at this point and were freaking out. My dad just happened to look in the exact right direction at the right time and saw this lady leading me away through a break in the crowd. He ran over to us, grabbed her shoulder, and she dropped my hand and disappeared in the crowd. I still can't believe he spotted us. It was like shoulder to shoulder people at this thing. Same thing happened to me at an amusement park. Only noticed it when I heard my mom scream for me. Looked up at someone I've never seen before. She let me go to my mom, thank God. Most recent one was at Lowe's near my house. Some dude looking pretty frazzled in old camo shorts and a shirt was hitting on women in the store. I'm a dude. As I'm walking down the main aisle, I guess I passed him and interrupted him getting the lady to walk away. So he's following me down the main aisle, tossing quarters at every fixture near me. Eventually I stopped walking as I got to my destination in the store and finally turned around to face this dude. I'm not confrontational by any means, but something just kind of hit a nerve, and just said in my manliest voice I could find, "Do we have a problem?" I guess it worked because the dude looked super startled, and tried to get away as fast as he could. Ended up reporting it to the manager. I don't know WTF he was doing, but I hope he left and stopped hitting on random women and just being a dick. It was weird. I was at a storage depot with my ex, picking up some stuff or other. Suddenly and without warning, this oldish guy approaches out of nowhere and starts a conversation with my ex. I'm in the unit at the time, so it's possible he didn't know I was there, but the clipped tone and monosyllabic answers from my ex were enough for me to know he was making her feel uncomfortable. That's when I heard him say, "Don't worry, I'm not going to rape you or anything." Like, literally 2 or 3 sentences into a conversation with a total stranger, he felt this would be a reassurance? So I stepped out of the unit, making my presence known by moving some stuff around in the hall, and his whole demeanor changed, somewhere between contrition and aggression, that I dared insert myself into whatever the F he thought this was. My ex stayed back while I kept the old bastard's attention on me, and he took me to task for calling him mate, a common thing British people do when they don't know someone's name, saying it was rude and disrespectful to a stranger. I responded with as rude and disrespectful as talking about rape to a young woman you thought was alone. He shuffled away, mumbling something about knowing the management, leaving us both a little shook. To this day, I have no idea what his damage was, but it was clear that he wasn't used to being confronted like that. God knows what he would have done if my ex had been alone. Something very similar happened to me while at work. I work in an adult store, typically alone. When I was about 2 months in, this guy comes in and right away, I noticed something was off about this guy. He started asking me to help him find porn, which we aren't allowed to do for safety reasons, as most of our DVD section has no camera coverage and management at the time forbid us from going back there with customers. I refuse to help this guy find his jerk-off material, and he goes, "What? It's not like I'm going to rape you." He walks away and then comes back up to me less than a minute later, asking for help with a product this time. I go over and tell him about this product. Out of nowhere, he asks me how much I weigh. I said, "Oh, I'm not sure, probably 210 to 220. He goes, "No way, I don't believe you," and he wraps his arms around me way too tightly and lifts me up off the ground. I had to literally beg this guy to put me down, and he didn't until I said, "Please, I have a bad back problem." I was beside myself and fully panicking, so I beelined it for the counter and waited for him to leave a few minutes later. I called my manager in tears. I was a mess. I've only seen him twice since then, and I kicked him out for stealing. I've never understood how they have a single person working the wee hours at those places. It seems a very high-risk situation. That's some Silence of the Lambs crap. According to people who study violence and escalation, it's likely he would have tried to rape her. People who say, "I'm not going to do this harmful thing to you," are generally telling you exactly what they are going to do to you. Edit. Several people have asked, so I'm just going to go ahead and put the info up here as well. The Gift of Fear is a book by Gavin de Becker, and I recommend it to anyone who wants to get a better understanding of red flag behavior, the escalation of violence, and how to trust one's own gut instincts. Especially for women dating men, this book is a lifesaver. Thanks for the gold. My feelings exactly, but to then have the gall to object to how he was addressed afterwards. I was getting froggy, I'll admit. It was an emotional response. He was excited and just about to commit to something that he'd probably been fantasizing about for a long time. You came along and stopped it. Think about the reaction of toddler when you prevent them from having some they desperately want and it is within arm's reach. He was having a temper tantrum. My siblings and me were walking across the road to a gas station. We frequently went there to grab snacks and such, and then we leave and go for a walk down a road behind it. Well, a car starts following us with its headlights off, so I quickly dip, telling my siblings to follow me. So we start running through a field and lay on the ground to wait for them to leave. Well, they drive down the road and then circle back. This happens about 4 to 5 times before they gave up and we went home. Jesus, that's effing horrifying. Glad you guys got out of that safely. I was walking home one night, a woman in my early 20s. It was pitch black, since I live in a little village with no streetlights. There was no one around and the road I was walking down was barely wide enough for 2 cars to pass each other. Then I heard a car start to move. Not the sound of it starting up, it sounded like it had been idling by the side of the road in the dark and just started moving. Not that I could see it clearly, mind you. Because it was dark and they hasn't put the headlights on. So I kept walking. And this car just trailed along behind me. Slowly. With the lights off. I was more than a little freaked out, but I wondered if I was overreacting. When I came up to the bend in the road, I ducked into my neighbor's garden and hid behind their hedge. When the driver realized they'd lost me, they turned on their lights and roared off. I continued on my way home feeling deeply weirded out, but I didn't think much more of it, and I don't think I really brought it up to anyone. Until the same thing happened again a month or 2 later. Luckily, I managed to pull the same trick again. Still, I really wish I'd reported it to the police. A very cheerful guy approached me and my friend in a park, in a very non-threatening way. He was holding a frisbee and explained he was putting together an impromptu game of ultimate frisbee and looking for people to join him. Which was fine, but then he tried to grab me by the throat. It was such a sudden change of mood. My friend, an athletic dude, fortunately, got between us and just stared him down and he ran away. The whole thing was just bizarre. Want to play? Sure. F you, now you die. I wonder what his deal was. Really disappointed that ultimate frisbee is non-contact. Maybe he just misunderstood that it is a misnomer. Ultimate. Effing. Frisbee. That's great, please let me go. But you're the frisbee. He was playing extreme frisbee. Honest mistake. Back when I was 16 working at Lowe's, some customer who was an old man walked up behind me without me even noticing and whispered in my ear, "Do you know where I can find the hoses at?" He said that so close to my ear where I could feel his warm breath while he was caressing my shoulder. My body froze up and all I could say was, "I think they're an all 5 whelp," shortly after I found out that he never even went to that end of the store where they were. Lol. He was probably asking you where the hose at, something I get asked by my friends constantly. They're also in all 5. Alphabetical. Only passenger in a train car in Europe late at night. A disheveled man, wild hair, and beard, tagged sweater entered the car and started pacing up and down the aisle. He is talking to himself in a language I couldn't understand. Every few trips he would stop in front of me and yell at me in whatever language he spoke. I would try to respond, but he didn't know English any more than I understood whatever language he was speaking. He would eventually give up yelling at me and would go back to pacing the aisle and talking to himself. This went on for hours. Really, wish I could have recorded him back then so I could eventually find someone to translate it. I think interactions get 10x scarier when you can't understand what the other person is saying. My wife and I were in Cancun, Mexico for vacation and got on a public bus to go downtown. A few stops later, a guy gets on the already crowded bus, stands near the front of the bus and starts talking very fast and loud. Didn't understand a word of Spanish, so I'm a little nervous. Is this a protest? Does he have a mental disorder? No idea what's going on? Then he opens up his backpack and starts selling candy bars. Lol. This actually made me laugh. Fear of the unknown. Is he making threats? Is he asking me for the time? Who knows? I was 16 and sitting on a train station with my mother. Some man came over and started talking to her. After a while I looked at the clock and informed my mother that we needed to go because our train was about to arrive. He flew up from the seat, started screaming at me, and wanted to fight me. My mother was confused and tried to explain to him that I was her daughter and that we really did need to leave. He just continued screaming, which of course made teenage me scream back at him. She had to pull me away from there. I never understood what made him see red like that. All I did was inform my mother our train was coming and we needed to leave. Some guy started yelling at me on a bus in Greek one time when I wouldn't make conversation with him, calling me a whore and presumably a bunch of other rude things. When I tried to pass him to go to another seat, he kicked me in the back. He wasn't drunk or high as far as I could tell. Some people are just psychopaths. I had the worst experience in Greece with the local men. Once a day, every day, someone would try and fight me. I always found it strange, as most of them were not big dudes, most were way smaller than me. Luckily, my Greek friend who was like 6'3" was there to intervene and give them a stern talking to. Lol. But sure enough, without fail every single day, some rando would try and fight me. You were obviously trying to take her away from me. My mom's married. Hands off, dude. I don't want a new dad. I used to be a cable tech for Comcast in a pretty busy metropolitan area. Because I ran escalations and such, I tended to also be routed to the wealthier side of the county, $1 million homes and up. I get a ticket for a cable box not working, and there's a note on the work order that the customer needs a form to switch the account owner. This can be easily done in a customer service center, but Comcast doesn't allow techs to bring those forms to customers or process them in any way. There's a method to it. They want to check ID and witness the customer signing the forms, and they just don't want text in it. Still, I do my due diligence and bring it up to my supervisor, who confirms I'm both not getting that form, and that I should suggest the customer head up to the customer service center. Cool. The call is in the afternoon, and I go head out on my route. I eventually get to the customer, and she lives in a condo building I tend to spend a lot of time in. I think the cheapest condo in this place is around $800,000, but it was built in the 60s and the wiring is atrocious. We're trying to support digital signal on cable that was designed, extremely poorly, for analog TV service. Anyways, I knock, she opens the door and is nice enough, and I take a few steps inside. I can see the cable box from where I'm standing, and I go through my normal spiel when she cuts me off and asks for the change of name form. I politely inform her that while I spoke to my supervisor about it, I wasn't allowed to bring her that form and that she would need to go in person to a customer service center. She absolutely explodes on me. She's calling me heartless, a butthole, telling me I'm worthless, telling me I should be fired. She's yelling that her ex-boyfriend was abusive and that because I wouldn't help her I was beating her just like he did. She told me he was going to kill her, and it would be my fault. She's screaming all this in my face, mere inches away from me. I'm in a rough spot. I'm a 6 burly guy that was digging up cable pretty regularly. I was in decent shape, and pretty muscular. She looked like a 90 pounds blonde crackhead on a binge. And we're alone inside her home. Anything she accuses me of at this moment I have pretty much no defense for, and I'm thinking that this woman could literally end my life as I know it by saying I hit her, or raped her, or something. And she's shown me she's fully capable of going that direction. To give myself time, I start looking at the cable box that wasn't working and find that it's just unhooked. Completely. So I check signal, which was normal for the crafty wiring in this particular building, and hook it up. She never stopped screaming all that crap at me through the process, and I'm not sure what to do. While I was working, I stayed always with my side to her so I could see her, because I was genuinely worried she might try to stab me with a kitchen knife. I turned the box on, and thankfully, it works. Nothing was wrong with it. She then screams that she's going to call Comcast and get my sorry ass fired. She walks into the other room and picks up her phone. I see this is the only shot I'm going to get, and I quietly head for the door. She'd locked it behind me when I came in, and I gently unlocked the door, opened it ever so slowly, closed it behind me, and then ran for the stairwell. She lived on the 14th floor, so I ran down 2 flights of stairs and caught the elevator there. I called my supervisor from my band to let him know I ran, and what happened, so there'd be a record that I was on the phone at the same time she was on the phone. Thankfully, there was no backlash at all. Funny enough, I was sent to her condo twice more while I was a service tech, and both times she A, didn't remember me, and B, was pretty decent, in that she let me do my job and just ignored me until I was done. But I will say that that day is the scariest encounter I had with a customer while I worked there. I was 19 and I was sleeping with the window open since it was a hot summer night. My boyfriend and I were both knocked out, but all of a sudden I wake up, just opened my eyes, didn't get up, and I had a horrible gut feeling and just an overwhelming feeling that I was being watched. I turned to my side and I see someone's head sticking in from the window. Needless to say, I had a heart attack, and as soon as they heard me get up, they left. Edit. Thank you everyone for the upvotes and awards. This actually the first time I've ever gotten any award on here, so I am very grateful. Hopefully to anyone reading this and some of the stories in the comments you learn to be always be careful and close your window. You never who might be trying to take a peek inside. Kind of similar. I once got up in the middle of the night and went to the bathroom, when I noticed a weird noise outside. For reference, I live in a small village, and although there are other houses, there's empty land in between, covered in waist-high vegetation. I open up the bathroom window, look outside, and there's a dude there. Squatting, almost like as if he was taking a crap, but occasionally moved slowly, and that's the sound I was hearing, him moving through the brush. For a second I didn't know what to do. He could have been a robber, possibly armed, and could easily shoot at me from the window. Despite that, I ended up yelling at him, "Get the F out of there." He panicked and ran towards the forest at the back of my house. My dog sensed him and kept barking, even 10 or 15 minutes after the encounter, so I was afraid he was still around and called the police. They came, searched the area for a bit, and said they couldn't see anything. Didn't sleep too well that night, but nothing worse ever came of it. I still think he must have been surveying the area, either looking into robbing us or the house on the other side of the patch, but fortunately, nothing ever happened. Holy crap, this one scares me the most. Even scarier if you live on the 4th floor. You can show me any horror film, Pinhead, Freddy Krueger, all of that. Event The Exorcist, not scary at all. Enjoyable, But not scary. Then show me a documentary or a news report of a neighborhood peeping Tom, serial rapist, serial murderer, or a story of someone who used a gas station bathroom on a lonely Midwestern highway, never to be seen again, and that is freaking unsettling. I wouldn't recommend the Night Stalker documentary for you then. He's actually one I had in mind when posting that comment. He was successful and striking because it was rather warm in Los Angeles that summer. People innocently left open their windows at night. He would simply enter unlocked/open windows. Similar thing happened with me when I was around 12. I was sleeping with window open, and suddenly woke up to some noise, and saw a hand coming in from the window. Scared the crap out of me. Screamed and went to my parents, who convinced me I was just dreaming, and I just went back to sleep. Next day, we found footprints all around the house and garden. In the coming weeks, few of our neighbors reported similar incidents, and this guy was caught some time later. See, this is why I won't tell my kiddo she was just dreaming. I want her to trust me enough to come tell me if she sees anything or heard something. Years ago, I lived next to a bar, and one night at like 2 a.m., some incredibly drunk lady climbed in through my bathroom window. Waking up to a stranger in your house isn't fun. Laughing my butt off. When my daughter turned 1, we went on a trip to Hawaii. When we sitting in the airport waiting to check in for our tickets, a man approached me and started commenting on how beautiful my daughter was. Fine, thanks, but it didn't stop there. He stood over me and continued to try and touch her and ask about her age, birthday, favorite things, where we were going, etc. I refused to answer, but he refused to move, and we were trapped. My husband came back and the man stepped away pretty quick. I told airport security, but they didn't do anything. We got to our gate, and a few minutes later, the same man sat and positioned himself where he could watch our daughter. If we moved seats, he kept her in his sight. I mentioned it to the gate agent, who brushed it off again. We got on the plane, and he managed to also be on the plane in a seat he could keep an eye on her. He kept smiling at her and getting up to walk the aisles and pass her. My husband got up and he came and said in baby talk, "I found out where you're going, didn't I?" I reported it to the flight attendant, who was not messing around. He was forced to switch seats and not allowed to get up again. Upon landing, there were people waiting for him that he was forced to go with, security or airport staff, I don't know, but we didn't see him again. I am 100% certain our daughter would have been kidnapped/trafficked if we had not been on high alert and reported him. That was 2 years ago, and I still remember how terrified I was. I'm glad someone finally took you seriously. That flight attendant was on his/her game. Just so everyone is aware, flight attendants aren't just sky waiters. They go through a ton of training for how to handle different situations, one of which is human trafficking, which they take very seriously. If you are ever in danger, or feel you are in danger when flying, speak to a flight attendant. They can relay messages through the pilots and ATC and have police waiting to greet you right at the gate. That said, most other airport workers do not have the responsibilities that flight crews have and often don't look past doing their job. It does not surprise me that you didn't get help from anyone until the flight crew was involved. I was about 10, getting back home from the park with my sister. She, being the stubborn younger I need no older sister playing mom to me sibling, walked purposely 20 meters ahead so nobody would even think we were together. She rounds the corner, and I hear a blood-curdling scream. I never covered 20 meters so fast in my life. I round the corner and there's a man, holding my sister by her throat, dragging her into an open car parked nearby. When he sees me advancing and yelling incomprehensibly, I honestly don't know what I yelled. I was scared out of my wits, and he realizes there's two of us. He drops her, jumps into the car and drives off. She had fingerprint-shaped bruises on her throat for days. Holy moly, just reading this is scary. Yeah, it's been 3 decades and I have this panicky reaction to this day when I'm out with the kids and they run ahead and round the corner. I'm instantly yelling at them to keep closer to me where I can see them. That sounds awful. That feeling will probably never leave you. When I was a young girl, my mom would take me to see every Harry Potter movie in theater when they came out. I kind of grew up with them at the same age as the characters, as did many 90s-born millennials. This had to be the second or third in the series as it was around 2003. About halfway into the movie, I need to go to the bathroom. On my way back from the bathroom, just outside the door to the theater, there stands a scraggly, dirty-looking man with a blue ball cap. His hand is extended outwards to me as if I'm supposed to grab it. He asks me, "Do you want to come with me, little girl?" The heaviest pit dropped in my tummy and I felt the general energy of extreme danger. Thankfully, my mom had been very diligent in teaching me some stranger danger street smart, so I just ran as fast as I could back into the theater, and planted my ass back in my seat beside my mom. She could tell something had shaken me bad. She kept asking what was wrong and I wouldn't tell her. By the time I did tell her, half hour or more passed. She took me to the theater staff, where a 16-year-old girl listened to my story and phoned the police. The police did not find him on site. I waited too long to tell anyone. I have a lot of guilt and regret towards my not saying something about it as soon as it happened. I worry that some other little girl went with him that day as a result of my inaction. Of course, I had some sense of his depraved and disgusting motives then. But now that I'm older, I know that he most likely planned to do very disgusting and pedophilic things. What does a 40-year-old man want to do with an 8-year-old girl? I will never forget his face. I'm 14 and was all alone in a dirt path in India, and some guy was just sitting on a rock in the middle of the forest. I didn't make eye contact, but I could see he was crying. I wanted to help, but my gut told me not to. 3 days later was caught for murdering his wife and 5-year-old daughter. Damn bro, good one for going with your gut. Older woman approached me on campus asking me to take her to this spot in town since she doesn't know where it is. I say no, it was a new city for me too, and she gave vibes. She insists it's right around the corner, so it's not that far, so suddenly she knows where it is. I refuse and she hesitates and then walks off. An older guy asks if she needs directions only for her to walk by him. I just thought it was strange, but I didn't really think about it. The next week, I check my phone when I get to class and someone posted an article about how this older woman, who was tied to multiple cases of human trafficking, was just caught by the police in a nearby town. From the description alone, I knew it was the woman I had talked to. Something almost identical happened to me when I was a teenager. I was walking home and a middle-aged woman stopped her car and in broken English asked me for directions to a nearby location. I gave her verbal directions that she showed no indication she was processing. Then she asked me to just get in and she would bring me back later. I refused. She insisted. I apologized and refused again, then left. I've been telling this story for years because I thought it was bizarre. Not once has it occurred to me that it could have been a human trafficking operation until I read your story. I think we assume the best because it's human instinct to be kind and helpful. I was walking to university when a guy in his car pulled over next to me and asked for directions to the local library. We were actually pretty close to it, so I gave him some simple directions, but he asked if I'd get in the car with him to direct him. I was like, no way will I be late to my lecture, and once I got onto campus my friend said, was it probably a kidnapping attempt? Never even clocked it at the time. We assume the best because it's human instinct to be kind and helpful. I found a useful screening tool is that people who actually need help usually aren't actively asking for help, or at least aren't particular about the form it takes. Like the day I was venting at my boss about how I couldn't afford a moving truck. She shocked the heck out of me by borrowing a pickup from her sister and spending 3 days between work shifts helping me move furniture. Or a few years ago on the bus, nervous dude asked me a few questions about the bus plaza, and then confided that his anxiety was acting up and the plaza being in the middle of a major remodel was not helping. So since I was going that way anyhow and wasn't in a hurry that day, I walked him to a few places at the plaza and around the area so he could get his errands done despite the anxiety, like a cross between a local guide and a service dog. Broad daylight, busy area, and I know that look of trying not to be overwhelmed by panic. As someone who also struggles with anxieties like the guy you mentioned, you are seriously a saint for helping him out. I'm sure he was so thankful for that. Your story makes me wonder about mine, too. Very similar, but approached at a gas station, although the vibes of the woman made me more think she was on drugs of some sort. The fun part, though, is after I kept telling her I couldn't give her a ride, she finally looked at my vehicle, saw government plates, freaked out, and ran off. If that wasn't an extra big clue to her being shady. My mother was a lifelong drug abuser, but in the early days, she merely had a habit. As time went on, she became more unscrupulous, stealing from dealers, and such. One day, Mom asks me to give her a ride to a friend's house. This should have set off red flags for me, but for some reason didn't, and sure enough, as soon as we arrive, the dealer comes outside and yells at her but promptly brandishes a gun and points it at me. I figured from context clues that if he couldn't stop her directly, maybe he could hit her where it hurts by killing her son. Edit. A lot of people are asking what happened next. Honestly, I'd been dealing with my mom's addictions my entire life, so at some point I stopped being scared and started being defiant. So this extended to having a gun in my face. I started yelling back, though I don't remember exactly what I said, but the next step involved putting the car in reverse and speeding the hell out of there. I realized that being defiant kind of kills the scariest moment of my life until I clarify that once my adrenaline wore off, I probably could have crapped my pants. WTF had happened next? Obviously he died. RIP Op, thanks for sharing. About 10 years ago at my sister's wedding, this older, very Italian guy, think of a mob guy, who I've never even seen before, comes up to me. He says, "Do you remember me a couple of years ago from the fair?" I said no. I honestly didn't at all. He says, "It's probably better that you don't," and then laughed and walked away. I was just standing there so confused. I still have no idea what that was about. I was a teen working in a cinema. After cleaning and locking up, I had to go by the bank and deliver the cash to a bank box, any amount between 2 to 8k euros. One day I was locking the front door. There's a pub on their other side of the alley. It was a busy night, so there was way more cash than usual. I come from a Scandinavian town that is not too busy. But sometimes in the summer, it can get pretty crowded. I was a little nervous because I had so much money on me. I'm a little paranoid. All of a sudden a man in a jokingly voice says, "Hands up and give me the money." I got so visibly scared that he excused himself. He then leaves laughing. Probably drunk. Man, I got scared. For some people wondering what I was doing with so much money, I knew the owners very well and they thought nobody would expect the teen that cleans up popcorn to carry the cash. TLDR. Had way too much cash on me, in a semi-dark alley. I was staying at a motel out of town. I was in my room on the bed in my underwear watching TV. Next thing I know, the door opens and a guy walks halfway in. He stops and we just kind of look at each other. I'm freaking out internally. I was 20 and a mama's boy and rarely went anywhere by myself. I didn't know if this was a robbery or a murder. I was completely stuck in fear. He looks at me and mumbles WTF. He looks at the door number, then his keycard, then back at the door number. Then he goes, "They told me my room was 223. I clear the fear in my throat enough to go, "I've been here all day, you might want to go tell them there is a mistake." He nods and closes the door and leaves. I'm 40 now, and the second I get in hotel/motel I deadbolt and chain the door. To be fair, it has happened to me before that hotel staff have given me keys to rooms that are already occupied. Awkward experience for everyone involved. Same. I'm in the National Guard and our leadership decided to put us up in hotels the night before we were activated for the whole capital thing. They picked some sketchy hotel in the area that had poor reviews, but what the hell, beggars can't be choosers, and it beats sleeping on a cot in the cold. Evidently the hotel had overbooked and wasn't prepared to find rooms for 120 soldiers, so there were a few, shall we say, errors in the process. One of my sergeants walked in on an occupied room where the people inside were having very rough sex, with all the lights on. 2 other people were also given keys to occupied rooms, but at least no one else interrupted some hanky-panky. When I lived in halls of residence, we didn't lock our doors because you already had to get through 2 locked doors to get to our flat. We trusted each other, and it was too easy to lock yourself out of your room otherwise. My flatmate was having a party one night and 2 very drunk girls came stumbling into my room, where I was eating ice cream in bed watching Howl's Moving Castle. We stared at each other for a long time. I think I scared them more than they scared me. I locked my door whenever there were parties after that. About 10 years ago, I was taking my girlfriend at the time home around midnight, on very rural back road in North GA. I was half asleep at the wheel when this lady runs out from the woods in front of my truck screaming, "Help me." I slammed on my brakes and rolled my window halfway down as I'm realizing she's covered in blood and mud and sticks and wasn't right. She reached her hands into my cab and grabbed my neck as hard as she could. I took off just a little down the road and found a crowd of distraught people outside their house and figured it was probably related. They asked if I've seen anyone and I told them she almost got run over. Well, she had been released from an asylum that day and had stabbed her mother. She showed me the wound on her shoulder. Later I drove back by and there were a dozen police cars lit up at the house. Creepy. That thought always crosses my mind when I'm driving alone at night. If somebody ran into the road in obvious distress, would I stop? I like to think I would help, but how do you know it's not a trap, or a psycho? I was probably 16, sitting at home alone on the computer when I looked up and saw a man on my back patio looking at the windows and heading towards the door. I have no idea what came over my stupid teen girl mind, but I opened the door and firmly told him to leave. It felt like the voice that came out of me was not mine. It was guttural, deep, and grounded, which was the opposite of how I felt. He looked at me and didn't move. He wasn't shocked, it was sort of like he was trying to challenge me or scare me by holding his ground. I said leave one more time with the same voice and he backed up. He said I was just looking for paint and I responded I'm about to start looking for my dad's gun. My divorced dad did not live with us, nor was there a gun in the house. Lol. I slammed the door, locked it, and went to call 911. They found the guy breaking into another house down the street. Thank God. I got to go pick him out of a lineup and everything. Still one of my scariest moments and possibly one of stupidest moments in my life. This guy consciously planned on robbing a house and all he could come up with was looking for paint? Genius. He's also the guy who, even after being confronted, decided he wasn't done for the day and he'd just pop on over to the neighbors to finish his shopping. But also very badass. The line between badass and dumb is very thin. Pretty much did it work? Whoa, badass. You dead? Well, what did you expect, dumbass? I'd like to second the badass comment. That fool. He fell victim to one of the classic blunders. Ah, the voice. You must be one of those Bene Gesserit witches. That stupidest moment is likely what saved you in that instance. Agreed, ease of opportunity was what he was looking for. Almost got stabbed, but I just apologized as if I did something to offend him. The guy didn't know what to do as I walked away. Edit. Thanks everyone for the great stories and awards. To answer the Canadian question, nope. I was just an awkward teenager. Back in my teenage years, a friend and I had taken a midnight walk to the gas station while stoned, and while on the way back with our chips and sweets, this dude around our age approaches us and demands our money. My friend pulls out his bag of jelly snakes and says, in the creepiest, drawn out, vaguely threatening pedo voice, would you like a lol? Little boy. The guy just backed away while muttering what the F. Man, who would pass on free jelly snakes? Shame. Reacting to threats of violence with absurdity actually works in some situations. In Antony Beevor's Stalingrad, he tells a tale of two officers who leap out of a burning building. They land on the ground and enemy soldiers approach them ready to shoot them. In desperation, the men pulled their trousers down. The enemy soldiers stopped, bemused, while the officers stripped down. The enemy soldiers considered they were too pathetic to kill, and carried on. It was over a decade ago that I read this book, so I cannot remember if they were Russian or German soldiers. A co-worker of mine told me a story about how she was cornered by a group of men in a back alley behind a restaurant. She is a tiny woman, so the thought of her having to fight off even one man scares the crap out of me. She was obviously terrified but had a quick idea. She started growling at all of them like an animal. They all got super freaked out and said, "This bitch is crazy," and backed off and left. I will come to your house and crap in places that will leave you confused. I feel like being unpredictable and possibly crazy is a pretty good defense. Thieves are opportunists. That guy did not present an opportunity for anything positive for the thief. I may be a thief, but I ain't robbing no weirdo. Your friend rolled a natural 20 on intimidation. Maybe a 19, since he didn't throw money at you guys before leaving. Or that guy rolled a 1 on street smarts. 15 years old on a school trip in London. Shady guy walks up next to me in the subway and staring intently at me. He pushes his thigh against my leg and I feel a little sting, Then I look down and see he is hiding a knife in his pocket. I just froze and he stood there for another few seconds before he walked away, presumably to terrorize someone else. Must have been some meth head but scared the living crap out of this pimply teenager. There's 2 instances that stick out. 1. This was in 2011. I was about 8.5 months pregnant, driving to an OB/GYN appointment by myself. This man pulled out directly in front of me. Luckily, the right lane was empty, so I whipped over, or I would have plowed directly into the back of his big SUV with my little sedan. I was very shaken up because his actions could have killed me and my unborn baby, so I blew my horn. Apparently, that angered him because he then followed me for several miles trying to run me off the road. He only stopped when he saw a cop. 2. A few years ago, I was in desperate need of a job and a friend helped me get on with his company doing home health. My job was a home health aide where I'd just go house to house, doing light housework, and helping the client wash up. Most of these people were out in the boonies where I couldn't get cell service. This one client lived in such a place. He gave me weird vibes from the get-go. I showed up at his requested time, cleaned up his house, and helped him wash up. I ask if he needs anything else before I leave. He grabs me quickly and pulls me to him and says, "Yeah, you can make love to me before you go." This man, who supposedly was too weak to even shower himself, had a very tight grip on me and I couldn't get away. It probably only lasted about 5 to 10 seconds, but it was terrifying. I was alone with this man in his home, no cell service, no neighbors, and not even a landline. I was thinking how he could do whatever he wanted to me and I wouldn't be able to do anything about it. Was he at least removed from the company's clients? Actually, no, and it wasn't the first time this had happened. As soon as I got away and got cell service, I called my supervisor and told her. She just sighed and said, "Oh, George is at it again, TSK. Let me know if he tries something like that again. Anyway, your next assignment is waiting, so be sure you get there on time." I quit. They didn't even warn you that you were working for a known predator. That is messed up. They did not, and I agree. When I was 5, a man tried to kidnap me from my great-grandma's porch. Still remember seeing her chase him away with a giant stick. Lol.edit, added her. Edit 2. Thank you for the awards. I love that my first comment to blow up on Reddit is about how amazing and fierce my great-grandma is. Had a similar event happen when I was like 6 or 7, went to the bathroom at a flea market and some dude followed me into the bathroom and locked the door behind him. My stepfather almost broke the door down after rushing over. I remember being in the stall going and the guy trying to push open the door. It was a small stall, so I was able to wedge myself between the back of the toilet and the door so he couldn't open it. I didn't think much of it at the time, but thinking back on it now, what a trip. What happened next? Did the guy get away? Did your stepdad beat 7 shades of crap out of him? I've never heard the phrase 7 shades of crap, but I will be using it moving forward. Thank you. Don't leave us hanging. Were you murdered or not? Granny the Great. I was like 6. Went to a restaurant with my parents and was on my way to the washroom when this middle-aged woman stopped me, kneeled in front of me, and looked me dead in the eyes. Her eyes were spirals. I swear to effing God. I was a kid and didn't know funky eye contacts were a thing, so I thought she was a witch trying to hypnotize me. I started crying, as one does. Closed my eyes to stop the mind control and ran away. Hit my head against a table. Cried some more. This woman really put on spiral eye contacts and said, "I'm going to scare the crap out of a kid today." She went out and chose violence. I was like 6, middle-aged woman, she was probably 17. So true. Lol. A homeless guy asked me for change while I was working nights. I told him sorry, I don't have any. Very calm, he replies, "How about we go to an ATM and take some money out before I effing kill you?" You don't have to be able to run fast, you just have to be able to run faster than the person you're scared of. He didn't end up chasing me. I was too scared to even look back at it. I'm Canadian. We don't do guns. Now stop pointing your AR-15s at the screen. Usain, you bolted out of there? Thank you for watching. Please subscribe to be the first to know about Red Rabbit Reader's new videos. If you like our videos, please like them on YouTube and share them with your friends. We welcome your comments below. Press to start another of our videos.